If your brain says dragon equals dragon, Marvel is about to bully you. Fang Foom is a 1961 alien monster. Shou-Lao is a 1974 mystical gatekeeper. Same scales, different engines. So let's fix it. 7 levels of Marvel dragons, starting with imitations and ending with world enders. And we'll pin each Marvel Snapdragon this dragon season to the right tier. Before we talk about true dragon power, we have to clear out the noise, because in Marvel, not everything with scales and fire breath is actually a dragon in the mythic or cosmic sense. Sometimes, it's just science wearing a costume. Dragon Man is where the ladder starts. He first appeared in Fantastic Four, number 35 inches, 1964, created by scientist Professor Gregson Gilbert as a massive, fire-breathing synthezoid. Gilbert wanted to build something that felt like myth using modern science, but it was the alchemist Diablo who truly brought Dragon Man to life, fusing technology and sorcery and unleashing him on the world. In his earliest appearance, Dragon Man rampages across a college campus, breathing fire, tearing through buildings, and forcing the Fantastic Four into a full-scale response. And at first glance, he looks like exactly what people imagine when they hear Marvel Dragon. Huge, armored, violent, catastrophic, but watch how those stories actually resolve. Dragon Man doesn't bend reality. He doesn't command magic. He doesn't reshape civilizations. He charges, he smashes, and then he's contained. Over and over again, Dragon Man is stopped not by gods or cosmic forces, but by planning, coordination, and technology. Reed Richards outthinks him. The team redirects him. Sometimes they don't even defeat him physically. They deactivate him, reprogram him, or exploit the emotional imprint inside him that makes him more childlike than cunning. Later comics make this even clearer. Dragon Man is often used as a pawn, stolen, reactivated, pointed like a weapon by other villains, because he doesn't have a will of his own. He has power, but no engine behind it. No culture, no cycle, no higher system he belongs to. That's what level 1 really is. Imitation without infrastructure. A dragon-shaped threat that creates local destruction but collapses the moment intelligence and strategy enter the room, which is exactly why the next level feels completely different. Because level 2 is where dragons stop being obstacles and start being institutions. Shou-Lao the Undying first appeared in Marvel Premiere number 16 inches, 1974, as part of the mythos of Kunlun. And unlike Dragon Man, Shou-Lao was never meant to be defeated in the normal sense. He exists to do something far more important. Shou-Lao is the dragon whose heart forges the Iron Fist. For generations, warriors seeking that power have faced him in ritual combat. If they survive, they brand the mark of the dragon into their own flesh and plunge their hands into his molten heart, absorbing a fragment of his immortal power. Danny Rand didn't become the Iron Fist by killing a monster. He became the Iron Fist by surviving a trial. And that difference matters. Because here's the part most people miss. Shou-Lao cannot truly be killed. He is called the Undying for a reason. He returns. The cycle continues. Another warrior comes. Another trial begins. Shou-Lao doesn't rampage across cities. He doesn't conquer worlds. He guards a system, a tradition, a power inheritance loop that turns human beings into living weapons. The destruction he represents isn't urban, it's personal. His power doesn't level skylines, it reshapes destinies. And that's the defining feature of this tier. Level 2 dragons don't exist to end stories. They exist to start them. They are renewable, ritualized, and bound to place and purpose. Their threat is not global annihilation, it's transformation, survival, worthiness. In Snap, Shou-Lao is a card. In Marvel, he decides who gets to become one. And once you understand that difference, once you stop judging dragons by how big they are and start judging them by what system they belong to, the rest of the ladder finally comes into focus. Because the next level isn't about trials. It's about what happens when a dragon doesn't guard a place, but wakes up beneath one. You've seen dragons that look big and scary and thought, that's level boss territory. But not all huge creatures are created equal. Welcome to level 3, Ancient and Terrestrial Catastrophes. This tier is where dragons are massive, truly old, and capable of wrecking cities, but they still live inside Earth's physics and require coordinated response, not reality rewriting. Start with Giganto. There are actually a couple of variations of Giganto in Marvel's history, but the one that matters for our ladder is the gigantic subterranean beast that debuted way back in Fantastic Four #1 1961, the very first issue of that series and one of Marvel's earliest kaiju-style threats. It was unleashed by the Mole Man from his underground realm to attack the surface world, tunneling up from below, smashing through towns, and forcing the newly formed Fantastic Four into desperate defense. In those stories, Giganto isn't plotting or scheming. It's literally a force of nature, a massive, deviant-engineered creature with superhuman strength, endurance, and the ability to burrow and hold its breath indefinitely underground. The threat it represents is visceral: infrastructure crumbling, evacuation orders, strategic retreats, and heroes trying to buy time. The solution always comes down to coordination and physical response, not cosmic banishment or a magic lock. Now, the Dragon of the Moon is a different flavor of beast, but still firmly terrestrial in this tier before we hit cosmic. First appearing in Defenders number 138 inches, 1984, this dragon is the sole survivor of an ancient race of demons and has goals far beyond rampaging rubble. It seeks power by corrupting the human mind, manipulating heroes, and bending willpower. In classic stories, it secretly inhabits the mind of Moondragon long before revealing its influence, cultivating arrogance and moral decay from the inside out. When it later manifests physically, this version of the Dragon of the Moon shows powers far beyond brute force: energy blasts, teleportation, mind control, and the ability to reshape matter itself. That's why, even though its footprint looks similar to other kaiju, its mode of destruction is both physical and psychological. It doesn't just level a city, it turns defenders against each other and erodes cohesion before the first punch lands. Both Giganto and the Dragon of the Moon show why this tier matters. These aren't dragons that rewrite reality, but they do demand real strategy. You can't punch them into submission the way you might a level 1 menace. You need coordination, planning, and often external support. The danger is colossal. Yes, rooftop collapsing, highway splitting, whole district evacuating danger, but it's still a world where teams, artifacts, and tactics can turn the tides. In snap terms, this feels like a board war that gets real fast. Pressure from everywhere, threats that demand creative answers, and the kind of card interactions where one misplay costs the whole lane. Dragon of the Moon in particular blurs the line between physical and mental pressure, making it feel bigger than it actually is on the raw damage scale. But even here, heroes aren't calling in sorcerer-level containment just yet. They're still standing on Earth, still answering to gravity, strategy, and coordinated defense. And that's exactly why when you see these dragons hit the board and snap, you feel that weight. Not because they're rewriting cosmic laws, but because they change the rhythm of every lane. When we hit level 4, the board really starts to flip. This isn't about old beasts that wake up and smash cities. This is about dragons that bring plans, culture, and agendas with them. Dragons that don't just destroy, they take over. At the center of this tier is Fang Foom, one of the most iconic dragons in all of Marvel lore. He first appeared in Strange Tales number 89 inches, 1961, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby during Marvel's early monster era. But while his origin feels like a throwback, his threat is anything but simple. Foom isn't a beast born of magic or mutation. He's an alien, a member of the Makluans, a race from the planet Kakaranathara, also known as Maklu IV in the Greater Magellanic Cloud. These dragon lords left their homeworld thousands of years ago, intent on conquering new worlds. Foom and his kin use their natural shape-shifting powers to assume human guises and infiltrate human society, learning and observing long before revealing their true nature. In his debut story, a historian in ancient China awakens Foom from slumber to fight a threat to his homeland. Foom rises, reshapes his enormous body, and decimates the enemy camp, and almost everything else around it. But that's just the beginning. Over the centuries, Foom periodically awakens from hibernation, rampages across the land, and tangles with Marvel's heavy hitters. He's faced the Hulk in battle, traded blows that shook the skies, and even once fought Thor himself, only to evade the god's killing blow and escape to Antarctica to sleep again. This combination of size, intelligence, and alien tech is what makes level 4 different. Foom doesn't just knock down buildings, he brings strategy. He can fly at supersonic speed on massive wings, unleash acid-like breath, shapeshift into humanoid form, and communicate telepathically. He regenerates and survives centuries in hibernation, awakening not because he must, but because the conditions favor his reemergence. In many stories, Foom isn't acting alone, he's part of a broader Makluan footprint. In some classic arcs, his awakening is tied to rings of power and ancient conspiracies that pull other characters into play, revealing that Makluan influence on Earth spans infiltrators, hidden agendas, and cosmic agendas far beyond a simple creature attack. What sets this tier apart is not just the raw physical threat, but the infrastructure behind it. Level 3 dragons wake and destroy. Level 4 dragons organize, plan, and return. They bridge worlds and timelines. You don't stop them by knocking them out of the sky. You counter their strategy, their adaptability, and the legacy they carry with them. In snap terms, this feels like the moment your opponent stops reacting and starts setting up win conditions of their own. Level 4 dragons don't just contest the board, they reshape it with tempo, placement, and presence. And Fang Foom is the baseline ruler of that tier, the name that every other cosmic dragon measures itself against. By the time you reach this tier, dragons stop feeling like monsters and start feeling like myths that learned how to bleed. This is where Marvel places its mythological and Asgardian dragons, beings whose power doesn't come from biology or alien evolution, but from curses, realms, and story-level magic. And the clearest example is Fafnir. In Marvel, Fafnir was not born a dragon. He was once a dwarf of Nidavellir, twisted by greed and cursed into a dragon to guard a vast, enchanted horde. His transformation didn't just change his body, it rewrote his nature. He became a living embodiment of obsession, wrath, and mythic punishment. When Fafnir appears, the scale of the story changes immediately. He isn't unleashed on a city by accident. He emerges because a legend is being activated, a treasure disturbed, a curse fulfilled, a prophecy stirred. Fafnir has battled Thor directly, and that alone tells you everything you need to know about this tier. When Thor shows up to a fight and it's not a clean win, you are no longer in the world of terrestrial catastrophe. You've crossed into mythic power. In their confrontations, Fafnir withstands divine blows, shrugs off conventional weapons, and unleashes hellfire capable of harming gods. The terrain doesn't just crack, it becomes a battlefield of realms. Enchanted steel, runic barriers, otherworldly fire. The rules of the fight no longer belong to Earth. And yet, even here, something important remains. Fafnir is not limitless. He is devastating, but he is also bound to his horde, bound to his curse, bound to the myth that created him. That's the defining feature of this level. Level 5 dragons draw their power from story engines, Asgardian magic, ancient bargains, divine transformations. They force gods into the room, they demand enchanted answers, but they still exist inside a mythic framework. Their strength is enormous. Their presence reshapes battles, but their outcomes are still governed by rules. Curses can be broken, hordes can be reclaimed, fates can be challenged. Fafnir doesn't threaten the universe by existing. He threatens it by being activated. And that's the difference. Level 3 destroys cities. Level 4 conquers worlds. Level 5 invokes the divine. If Thor is trading blows, if Asgardian steel is drawn, if victory depends on runes, worthiness, or the breaking of an ancient curse, you're standing on this tier. But even myth has a ceiling, because above, the gods are not bigger gods. Above them are power sources, and that's where the ladder turns dangerous. By this point on the ladder, dragons stop being creatures. They become manifestations. This is the tier of dimensional and hell-aligned dragons, beings whose power does not originate in their bodies, their blood, or even their myths, but in external realms that never run dry. This is where Marvel places dragons tied to planes like the Crimson Cosmos of Sidorak, the same extra-dimensional source that empowers the Juggernaut. And the difference is immediate. When these dragons arrive, the environment doesn't just shake, it warps. Gravity behaves strangely. Energy behaves strangely. Minds behave strangely. The world stops acting like a place and starts acting like a ritual space. That's because these dragons aren't running on internal strength. They're running on a conduit. Sidorak is not a powerful being in another place. He is a power system, an endless magical font that bleeds into reality through artifacts, avatars, and creatures bound to his dimension. When dragons tied to forces like this manifest, they don't enter the battlefield as combatants. They enter it as extensions of a realm. In stories involving Sidorak-aligned entities, heroes quickly learn that brute force doesn't scale anymore. Punching them feels like punching a doorway. Energy attacks are absorbed, redirected, or rendered meaningless. The fight stops being about damage and starts being about containment. Sorcerers get involved. Wards go up. Reality is negotiated. These encounters almost always follow the same rhythm. A breach opens. Something comes through that does not belong. The terrain becomes unstable. Magic stacks on itself. The dragon's presence begins to contaminate the space around it. Emotionally, physically, sometimes even temporally. Heroes try to engage it the way they would a god or a monster, and the story makes it clear very quickly this thing cannot be beaten in any lasting sense. So, the objective changes. Not defeat, disconnection. The climax of these stories is almost never the dragon collapsing. It's the portal closing, the seal completing, the conduit severing, because the true enemy was never the dragon. It was the infinite battery behind it. That's what defines this tier. Level 5 dragons draw power from myth. Level 6 dragons draw power from realms. External, replenishing, other law power sources that turn the fight into a countdown. Every second the conduit stays open, the dragon doesn't get weaker. It gets closer to full expression. That's why victories at this level feel different. They're not triumphs. They're emergency repairs. You don't kill the storm. You close the sky. And that's also why this tier still isn't the top. Because even dimensional forces operate inside systems. They have planes. They have sources. They have structures you can reference, seal, or disrupt. There's still something outside the dragon that can be targeted. And once that stops being true, you reach the last rung, where there is no conduit, no banishment, no higher power to unplug, only the event itself. At the top of the ladder, dragons stop being threats. They become endpoints. This is the tier of cosmic world enders, beings whose existence is not a problem to solve, but a conclusion waiting to happen. And the clearest example Marvel has ever used is Jormungandr, the Midgard Serpent. Jormungandr is not defined by how hard he hits. He's defined by what happens when he moves. In Marvel's Asgardian mythos, the Midgard Serpent is so vast he encircles the earth itself, coiled beneath the oceans, unseen but never absent. His body is part of the planet's silhouette, his sleep is part of its stability, and his awakening is the opening note of Ragnarok. Every major story involving Jormungandr carries the same premise. If he rises, the world is already in its last chapter. When Thor battles the Midgard Serpent, the fight is never framed as a contest of strength. It is framed as a fulfillment. The serpent surfaces, the skies break, the seas convulse, and God and dragon kill each other. Thor slays Jormungandr. And then, poisoned by the serpent's venom, Thor takes 9 steps and dies. No victory, no sequel hook, just mutual destruction. That outcome is not a failure of power. It is the function of the serpent. Jormungandr is not a monster you stop. He is a prophecy that executes. That's what makes this tier different from everything below it. Level 6 dragons are fueled by realms. Cut the realm, the dragon falls. Level 7 dragons are the realm's outcome. There is nothing to unplug, nothing to banish, no higher authority to invoke. The story does not ask, can the heroes win? It asks, is it time? These dragons don't escalate conflict, they close it. Their presence rewrites calendars. Their stirring is measured in ages. Their battles are treated like geological events. When Jormungandr surfaces, civilizations are not endangered. They are expired. That's the highest level Marvel assigns a dragon. Not power that dominates, power that ends. And that's the ladder. From Dragon Man, a dragon-shaped machine, to Shou-Lao, a living trial, to ancient beasts that level cities, to alien dragons that build empires, to mythic dragons that force gods into the room, to dimensional manifestations you can only seal, and finally, to dragons that don't threaten the world. They finish it. Here's the core rule that makes all of it click. Size is a decoy. Power source is everything. Shou-Lao doesn't change cities. He changes people. The Dragon of the Moon doesn't just break buildings. It breaks minds. Fang Foom doesn't just attack. He plans. Fafnir doesn't just fight. He activates myth. Dimensional dragons don't drain. They channel. And Jormungandr doesn't conquer. He concludes. Once you stop judging dragons by how big they are and start judging them by what engine they run on, Marvel's chaos turns into structure. And Snap does too. So now I want to hear from you. Pick a dragon. Drop it in the comments. Tell me which tier you think it belongs in and why. And if there's a dragon you think deserves its own deep dive, let me know. Because this ladder doesn't end with this season. It's just getting started.